Thank you for all joining us today. My name's Sarah, and I'm delighted to have the pleasure of introducing you to Raashid and Matt. Raashid really is all things malware. He lives and breathes threat hunting and spends almost every waking hour reverse engineering malware. It's something he's been doing for over a decade. Raashid is very much our Emotet expert. And joining Raashid is Matt, and Matt's been flying the anti-abuse flag and working to protect the internet for way more than a decade. Nowadays, Matt is Spamhaus's industry liaison, doing exactly that. He works together with the industry to make the internet a safer place for all of us. Just before I hand over to Raashid and Matt, I'd like to mention that there will be a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. I've already opened up the Zoom Q&A window, so you can place your questions in there as and when you think of them. But just to let you know, we'll be answering them all together at the end. And now over to Matt.
Thank you, Sarah. So this is what we're going to cover today. So we're going to be looking at a few things about Emotet, some of the highlights of the malware, and what we're currently seeing today. Then we're going to be looking at a few of the examples that you may run into or that your users may run into. And then we will be looking at some of the inner workings of Emotet, a little bit of a technical look into it, looking at how it infects things and a little bit about the distribution modules that it has. And then finally, we're going to be looking at some remediation, what happens when you get infected, and also some mitigation techniques that you can use. And then, of course, finally, we'll be doing a little bit of Q&A with you. So with further ado, we're going to be taking a look at the highlights of Emotet. So Emotet or Geodo, that's how I pronounce it. I know some others may say things in different ways, but this was a malware that was first observed in 2014, and it was largely seen as a banking Trojan. That's a Trojan that installs on your network and will try to gain access to credentials of banking accounts and whatnot. This was something that was, of course, very successful as a Trojan, but the people that develop Emotet decided that they wanted to modify it. And they modified it over into not just a credential stealer, but a loader. So essentially what a loader is it will install other pieces of malware onto your workstation. So it can constantly update itself and put things onto your workstations on your network. And one interesting thing about Emotet is it's intermittent throughout the year. It starts and stops and starts and stops. I guess that the malware people like to take a vacation every now and then. The way that we're largely seeing this malware being distributed on the internet is via email, and when it started out, it was just using JavaScript. And of course, JavaScript is something that people can just be like, oh, okay, we can just block all that from happening. So people were able to mitigate it a little bit easier. But now it's using macro-enabled attachments. It's linking to URLs, and in some cases, some emails may even contain the malicious script themselves, where people are allowing these scripts to be run within the emails. But it's largely happening via that type of distribution method rather than JavaScript. Another interesting thing that we see with Emotet is it is hijacking threads of email conversations. So what it does is it gets into somebody's mailbox and it steals all of those emails. It will look through those, and when they see there's a thread going on, they'll insert themselves into that thread and provide some type of update to try and trick the user into clicking on a link or into downloading a file. Because if a discussion is going on, you're more likely to trust that what email comes in, if you see that there was a previous whole thread about it that maybe you were even involved in, that they'll likely click on that. A couple last things that are interesting about it is, well, this is a self-updating malware, so it will push updates to itself to update Emotet and also to update and install the additional malware. And last piece about it is it's a polymorphic malware. So it is something that is very difficult for a network administrator or a security expert to be able to detect, because it's not something you can just be like, all right, here's this signature that matches Emotet, boom, I'm done. No, it evades that type of detection. One other thing is it's aware of if it's within a sandbox environment. So we're, with all of this stuff, we're going to take a little bit of a look at what we're seeing Emotet looks like today. So Spamhaus was able to see that Emotet resumed activity on July 17th, and it's still primarily using email, and is using this mixture of these attachments and URLs to distribute itself amongst the internet. And one thing that I have been seeing in some of the reports regarding Emotet is the PowerShell command that gets run when somebody actually clicks on a URL or an attachment and runs the macros. It looks like they're starting to obfuscate those URLs, so they're a little bit more difficult to figure out where they're going to. But that's just evolution of this malware. So we're looking at a little bit here some of the numbers that Spamhaus has observed. These, of course, are not the total numbers for Emotet. This is just what Spamhaus is able to observe. As much as we want to be able to see absolutely everything that is happening on the internet, unfortunately, we're not able to. But this is what we're seeing, and a couple of interesting things to think about when you're looking at these numbers. Out of those total emails sent and the differentiation between total emails sent and the unique recipients targeted, there's a very small overlap there. It seems that what Emotet wants to do is be able to send single emails to these recipients. They're not sending like thousands of emails a day to one recipient every time. They're trying to do that to, well, avoid detection, avoid people from sounding the alarm, being like, well, we're under attack by this thing. So there is a small overlap there. In both cases, you see that it's probably about maybe a 20 to 30% overlap that's happening there, and that makes Emotet a little bit more effective. And the last thing that we're looking at here with these numbers are those distribution URLs. And I'd love to thank URL House for being able to provide us this visibility. So it's something we're able to track and be able to detect and be able to help protect our users from. But that's something where you see that there's a large number of these URLs of these websites that are distributing out Emotet. So with all of this, we're going to look at some examples here. So the first example that we're looking at is this is from a school in Germany. Well, it's trying to pretend that it's from a school in Germany. So a couple of things to look at here. If you look up at the from header, I know that everything is redacted except for the domain, the TLD in there. But the thing that I wanted to point out there is that, well, the from is trying to show to the user that it's from a .de, but unfortunately, it's coming from a .at domain. So completely different countries being used here to be able to try and distribute this malware. And what this email is more or less saying is some information about the school that they're trying to get this user to download this attachment, and it's specifically pushed to somebody who is in Germany, and of course it's written in German. I cannot speak to how well it's written in German, but it's trying to just get somebody to click on this email. One thing that I also want to point out is when you look at that header, that 117.255.124, that IP is something that you will see that shows up in our examples here. And one last thing to look at here is the AW dot colon. That is a response to a thread. So while we don't see that there is a full thread going on, what you will see in some of these malware examples is that they're trying to make you think that this is a response. Somebody made a response. They didn't include the rest of the thread, but they made a response. So it's trying to let somebody say, okay, this is a response. So they're still trying to carry on a conversation. And sometimes people just may look at that and see that, okay, I've received this email before and we're having a look back and forth. And while you could, this is potentially thread hijacking. One of the examples that we're going to look on a little bit later shows you in detail some of the thread hijacking phenomenon that we've been seeing. So we're going to take a look at another example here. And this one is, I can read this one because I can read English. So this one is in English, and it is trying to pretend that it is a hen and stag organizer, and they're trying to send this to an apartment complex, and get them to of course download the attachments that are attached to this. One thing that I do want to point out is that you see that the 117.255.124 is in there. So it's coming from that same IP space. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the same, it's not trying to target the same type of thing, but it's a completely different type of email coming from this space. And what they're trying to do is just get somebody to download this attachment because they're trying to say, okay, let's get you to answer these questions. And somebody's like, okay, do I respond? Do I download the attachment? And a lot of the times people are just going to be like, okay, I just get that attachment, download it, fill out my stuff, and send it back. Unfortunately, when they do download that attachment, they're going to get themselves infected with Emotet. So the last thing that we're going to look at here is a different example from the other two. So this is one that's using not an attachment, even though it says, please open the attached document, it's sending you to a URL. And that URL is what is going to infect the user with Emotet. So one thing to point out here, I talked about thread hijacking a little bit in that first example, but this one shows you full on. When you look down here at the email that's included here, you see that there is a previous email from July 21st, 2016. Now, I don't know many people that are going to wait 4 years to respond to an email, but here we are. And what this is saying here is more or less something about aircraft and figuring a few things out about it. And what the attempt here is to say that they're trying to make it look like a full thread is going on. So you have Wayne in here who did this email in 2016, and then somebody pretends that that Kevin said something, or Tom said something to Kevin, and then finally the last one up here is the Tom email address is trying to let somebody go and click on that that URL to get in. So one thing to consider here, while it is all redacted, the two Aaron is the same domain as, if you look in the body for Tom dot that redaction.com is the same domain as that Aaron domain. The same goes along with that Wayne email address that's in that response from 2016. So they're trying to make it all line up so everything looks like it's coming from this discussion that's already been happening. So it's really trying to trick somebody into that clicking on something. And one last thing is looking at the IP address in there was coming from Comcast. So with all of this, I'm going to put this over to Raashid so he can talk a little bit about some of the technicalities behind Emotet and some of the modules and things, so we can learn a little bit more and see how this malware functions.
Thank you so much, Matt, for the detail about the malspams and everything. So, hello everybody. My name is Rashid, and I'll be discussing about the tech side of Emotet binary. So, every time whenever there's an infection on Emotet, we wonder what happens on an infected machine. What's the anatomy? What's the structure of an infection? So basically, when an infection happens, the first thing that it does, it turns victims into spammers, and immediately it starts spamming. So that's the first thing it does. Also, because Emotet guys, they have to monetize from their criminal activities. Emotet becomes a gateway for other banking trojans to land into the infection, to steal banking credentials, of course. Also, it does not only infect one particular infection, but it spreads all across the network drives, and it utilizes a very well-known technique for that, which is using the weak passwords. So also, one of the specialities about an Emotet infection is that uh, infections later on become part of command and control server. So they act as proxies to route traffic through the chain proxies towards the final command and control server. Also, it scrapes all the email addresses for lateral movement. So not only it infects your machine, but it also infects all the friends and family in your email box. So, and to do this, it doesn't have it doesn't carry a specific set of hard-coded credentials. Instead, what it does is it uses stored credentials for spamming and for lateral movement, like in the case of scraping email addresses and sending spam to them. And it also recently started using this email body stealing, so that the spams look more baitable. They look more baitable. That is something which I'll be discussing in the later slides. So, so this is basically Emotet comes in the form of a malspam initially. So there are two type of infection chains that happen. The first one is the Emotet link infection chain. So in that case, you get a malspam email, and then in the malspam email body, there will be a web link, and the web link would, if you click on it, it would take you to a Word document which has macros in it. These macros are programmable, and these macros, when executed, downloads an Emotet binary from the internet, and then you get the follow-up malware. In the same case, there is Emotet attachment infection chain. So the difference between these two are instead of having a web link, it has an attachment. That is the Word document which has the macros. So there's like the web link is removed in between. Instead, it keeps Word document as an attachment. Now, the first thing that lands on an infection is the Emotet loader binary. It has couple of it does a couple of things on the infected machine. The one of them is it contacts the command and control servers to receive further modules, and these modules later on would be glued together, and they will all act up as one unit, which I'll be discussing in coming slides. It also achieves persistence on an infected machine, so that if you turn off your machine, it survives the reboot. Now, this main binary, the main loader, that's the first thing that comes on an infection, right? So it's always packed so that it can evade antivirus signatures. So the way it's packed is if you try to scan it over engines, it would be undetected. Not only that, but the main layer beneath the packed layer, which is the main code for Emotet binary, is obfuscated. So why do they do it? To make it harder for researchers like me to reverse engineer and analyze the code. So if we are trying to reverse engineer it, it would be pretty difficult to reverse engineer it because it's obfuscated. This is this is the rough diagram of what an Emotet ecosystem looks like. as I told you, it's a modular system. So it has got a lot of plugins that are combined together, glued together, and they all act as a single unit. And then one more special thing about Emotet network system is that it has rotational command and control servers, which I'll be discussing further in the coming slides, that what it means and how it kind of provides this resilience against takedowns. Also, it has a wide range of different modules, so ranging from stealing credentials, sending spam, and spreading Emotet across the network lateral movement, which I'll be discussing next. So these Emotet modules, which land onto the infection after the loader binary gets loaded, it's basically just like any other plugin system for a typical software. So what you do is it's like these modules, they basically extend the functionality of Emotet. And these are plug and play. So that means that Emotet authors, they don't need to necessarily recompile the Emotet binary in order to add functionality to it. Instead, they can just host it on their command and control server and supply these Emotet modules on fly and keep on adding functionalities as they have done over the past years. So these modules, they add functionality like there's a spam sending module, credential stealing module, and the lateral movement module. Now, what I'll do is I'll go through the most important modules in Emotet, and I'll discuss what they do. The first module that lands on an infection as soon as it contacts the command and control server is the lateral movement module. So it adds like a worm functionality to Emotet. It spreads across network drives that are configured with weak password. So this module has like a hard-coded dictionary of most commonly used weak password, and it tries to attack the network and tries to log in with these passwords. And if it's successful, it will try to replicate across the network. And it's self-replicating. That means if 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 the module is able to land into a network a connected computer, and that computer is connected to further another network, it would try to replicate it across the networks. So yeah, it tries its best to spread and use leverage on the network and the credentials to spread across.
This is one of the most important modules that gets downloaded on an Emotet infection, and this is the spam module. It basically turns infections into spam sending machines, and the spam that is sent out there is seasonal and it's downloaded from command and control server. What I mean by seasonal is if it's like, let's say it's holiday season, let's say it's Christmas, the themes would be based on that. It would be Christmas themes. If it's a tax season, it would be tax related themes. It makes it more baitable for the user to open those spam emails. Now, as of now, this spam module all linked together forms the largest spam sending network out there. Millions of spams are sent out every single day using these modules. Now, this module does not have a specific set of hard-coded credentials that we could just block and so that we could get rid of all the spam sent by these modules, but rather it utilizes stolen credentials from all the infections for sending spam.
So the next module that we'll discuss is the proxy module. This again is a very important module in Emotet, and it turns infections into proxy command and control servers. So if you see on the diagram, there's like all these proxy command and control servers. They are chained together, and the traffic routes through each and every proxy command and control server, and it eventually reaches to the main command and control server, which is hidden behind all these proxy nodes. So the job of this proxy module is to convert potential infections into command and control proxies. And even it does so by, even if the computer is behind, if the infection is behind a NAT, it opens a port on the router using UPnP. That's why we call it UPnP plugin. And right now, we were able to observe that there are around 3K infections that are chained together, and it lets Emotet spread that traffic across and finally reach to the main command and control server, the tier 1 command and control servers. And it kind of makes Emotet takedown resilient, because essentially all the command and control servers in a main binary are just proxy command and control servers. So if we take down one command and control server, essentially we're taking down an infection. But there are so many of them chained together that it would be very difficult to take down all of them and to finally reach to the main command and control server. Now, the other module which lets Emotet to kind of spread across and do the lateral movement is the stealer scraper module. So this module steals stored emails, website credentials, and email bodies. But it also it steals the email bodies so that the spam sent out later would be a reply to an email thread which already happens, so that the spam becomes more baitable. It becomes more convincing for the user to click it, right? Imagine it this way: if we're having a conversation, me and my friend, and then later on a reply to that conversation, I get the emoted spam. Obviously, it becomes more baitable. I'm going to open that attachment. This module targets commonly used browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Thunderbird for the email stealing, right? And FTP programs and stuff. So that's how it steals all the credentials to do the lateral movement. I'll go a little bit into the distribution network and the host and at how to detect how would if you have an emoted infection, how would you detect it quite easily. So these are some of the ways we can kind of detect emotet on a host or a network. But the thing about these detection techniques is as emotet keeps on evolving, these techniques they don't live for long, right? So the first one that is there is the install file names. So when the emotet main binary gets loaded on an infection, it has a specific name, and this name is generated based on a hard-coded dictionary inside the binary. And this dictionary is salted with the computer's hardware ID, and a unique name is generated from it. If the parameters are known, for example, the dictionary and the hardware ID, one could pretty much predict what the install file name of an emoted infection binary would be like on a host. And if that file is present, most probably you are infected. Another thing that we can do on the network level is the template macro payload regular expression. So if we are able to filter out the web traffic using a regular expression, we can pretty much block these macro files from downloading the emoted main binary. Also, there are other things like infection markers, like mutexes and events that get generated on the infection. But again, as I said, Emotet keeps on evolving, so these are short-lived. They keep on changing these kind of things. So now I'll hand it over back to Matt to discuss about the remediation techniques in Emotet.
Thank you, Raashid. That was a very insightful technical explanation of how Emotet works, and I hope that our more technically inclined folks were able to get a few things from that. So now, we've looked at a few things, and now we're going to look at. So you've been infected. Now what? So you have been able to find Emotet with some of the methods that Raashid just explained, and you see that it's on your network. These are some of the things that you can do to prevent, not prevent, to be able to mitigate the problem, to get those infected machines cleaned up. So one thing that we're going to talk about here, and it's something that I've talked about in every single presentation, webinar, regular conversation, just make sure everything's up to date. And that's something that everybody should have hard coded into them in the days that we live in, because if there's something that can be exploited, it will be exploited, and it's usually because the software is out of date. So you've identified these compromised machines. Make sure they're updated, and they need to be completely removed from that network. So that's that's your step one. And I know that sounds like absolutely horrid, and it is. This is one of these things where you are going to have to go through, in some cases, one by one, and detect what machines are compromised and be able to mitigate the compromise as quickly as possible. So you need to isolate things. And the next thing that you want to do is you want to remove all administrative sharing. Because this malware can move laterally throughout the network, you want to prevent any type of lateral movement, and that's why you remove all of that type of stuff. And that means that even after you've put it back onto the network, you don't just instantly uh, put all of the administrative sharing back in place. You keep it off until you're pretty sure that everything has been mitigated. Next thing on here, change all passwords. And I'm not just talking about changing the user passwords or the passwords on the box. You want to be able to change those passwords on the administrative shares, on the administrative passwords, on anything that's going to allow access in some way, form, or fashion. And then the last thing, I know it sounds simple, remove Emotet. We don't have any specific recommendations, but there are many things out there that can allow people to remove Emotet from an infected system. So now we're going to look at some things that will prevent or mitigate Emotet from getting onto your network. So guess what? The first thing on there, keep everything up to date automatically if possible. Uh, that's I know that not everything can be updated automatically, but if you have the ability to do it, do it. And next on here is have an awareness campaign for your employees, for your customers, for your clients, whoever. Make sure you have some type of awareness. Now, I know that that doesn't sound very simple, but just letting somebody know that if there's a message from somebody who's trying to get something from you, uh, let people be aware that somebody could be trying to do something nefarious when they're trying to get something from you or trying to get you to do something. Uh, Let people just try to drive that awareness and have that idea constantly there. Uh, you know, tag emails when they are coming from an external source. So in the result that something is coming like in a thread hijacking scenario, especially that last one that I looked at, you would definitely see that that came from an external source and it wasn't inside of the domain of the company that had that thread hijacked. So letting people be aware of that type of stuff and providing them as many clues when they get emails will be very helpful for them. Next, back up the data. Uh, in many cases, nobody really has a good backup plan for their machines on their networks. They usually are just like, well, the individual can back up the stuff if they want to. I know that not every single organization is that way, but there are many cases where people just don't have a backup plan for the data. And that will help in the case that you do find an infection on your network. You can refer to those backups and be able to restore things a little bit faster, and it will just it'll be a little bit easier on yourself. Next, two-factor authentication. This is also one of these things that is talked about ad nauseum by our community, and that is the anti-abuse community. And the reason for that is, well, it just provides that much more of a challenge for the maliciousness out there on the internet to be able to gain access to people. And then you also have the if you do not have the ability to do that two-factor authentication, a strong passphrase, and that's really to prevent brute forcing from happening. And you could also do brute force detection on passwords. And that would be another thing that you could do to protect the authentication process. And next, we look at you want to be able to block out certain privileges from certain users. So you want to have the privileged users and the non-privileged users. There is no reason for Billy in accounting to have root access to everything or to have administrative access to anything. You want to be able to make sure that people that need the right type of access have the right type of access, but anybody who doesn't need that, they don't need it. And there should be a clearly defined rule on that type of access. Next, if you're thinking about this from an email perspective, you want to be blocking those incoming attachments. Now, I'm not saying block every single incoming attachment, but be reasonable about it. Understand that there's no reason that anybody should be receiving an executable in their emails. And if you can, try and block emails that have macro-enabled attachments in them. And this is something that you can detect with the right filtering. You'd be able to block a lot of this stuff from getting into the network if you're able to say, okay, if it's macro enabled, block it, and that would be able to stop a lot of this from getting into your network. And next, multi-layered antivirus and threat intelligence. So you want to be filtering that email, you want to be scanning that email, you want to be looking at multiple threat intelligence resources to be able to determine if the mail is good or bad. And this means that you just have that multi-layered approach. I always try and talk about, just like ogres, your security infrastructure needs to be like an onion, multi-layered. And then next, if you can, monitor the outbound mail traffic from your network. And honestly, monitor outbound traffic in general from that network. So you're able to see if certain things are going to certain places that A, they've never gone to before, or B, that they're going to in droves. And lastly, you want to segment and restrict your network from being able to have that movement that Emotet is able to do. You don't want Emotet to be able to go through all of your network. If you're able to restrict that access, so the accounting group does not have access to the engineering group, that doesn't have access to the support group, you restrict that type of access, so certain things aren't able to flow through. And one other thing that isn't mentioned in here but is effective is since a lot of the ways that Emotet is able to install itself on a network is via accessing these URLs that have the binaries for this malware on it. You can employ things like DNS firewall or DNS RPZ for some people, or you can use BGP routing to be able to block access to certain things that have been identified as botnet controllers. So these are just some of the things that you can do. And I know that this may not be the exhaustive list, but these are some of the things that you can do to really impact the mitigation of Emotet from getting onto a network. So with all of that, I'm going to go ahead and push this back over to Sarah so she can do the Q&As.
Thanks very much, Matt. That was great, and thanks, Raashid. Okay, so we have, I've had some questions come in via different areas. So the first one is, somebody has heard that Emotet is using Eternal Blue exploits. Is this correct? Raashid?
No, yes. So about that, no, there hasn't been any reports, or we haven't observed that Emotet has been using Eternal Blue, but rather, as I discussed in my slides, it uses very simple but effective techniques to infect and laterally move across the network.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I have another question from Simon. How can I avoid infected clients on my network sending malspam, i.e. outbound emails?
So in that case, as Matt and I also discussed about the remediation techniques, because essentially the question says that the infection has already happened. So in that case, all the remediation techniques like updating and blocking would certainly help. But as I said, in my slides, as I said, that there are rotational command and control servers, and it's a self-updating malware. So it's pretty much a cat and mouse game in that case.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then a question from Daniele. How is the persistence achieved by Emotet? Does it only use the registry, like the usual registry key? And probably for you, Raashid.
So in terms of persistence, it uses two techniques. It mostly uses the registry one, the common one, the run registry, and also in specific cases, it uses a service. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Just got a couple more questions coming in. Just working through them now. From Steiner, will Emotet malware be discovered by the Spamhaus DBL? That's the domain block list.
That's for Matt.
Yeah, those when we see those URLs that are part of that distribution network, yes, those will be listed within the DBL, and anywhere else that we would be putting domains would be where it would be listed, most likely under the malware category when you check against the return codes on the DBL.
Great, thanks, Matt. That's all the questions I have coming in. Does anyone else have any questions? If you do, oh, here we go. Kevin has just asked, Raashid, can you share details about how Emotet encrypts traffic to its C2 servers, command and control servers?
Well, if I go on answering this question, it would take another hour, but I can link you to a blog post by me that discusses about how the internal details of how it encrypts the traffic and sends it to command and control server.
That would be great. I tell you what, we'll be sending out an email to attendees after this, just with the link for the recording of this webinar. So Raashid, if you want to share that with me, I'll make sure it goes in that email to people.
Sure.
So they have access to it easily. And maybe for another webinar, Kevin, we'll have to do something around that for you. Helmut, is Emotet only seen on Windows, or are there cases of infections on Macs or Linux?
No, it's only seen on Windows. There are no cases for Mac or any other operating system.
Great. Okay, thanks. Any more for any more? Any more questions for us before we sign off? No? I don't think we have any more questions coming in. Oh no, sorry, yes we have. Distribution URLs, are they WordPress hacked web servers?
Yeah, mostly they're all hacked web servers. So they put up after hacking a WordPress installation, they put up the payload over there. Yeah, most of them are hacked web servers.
Okay, thank you. No questions. Thank you all for saying thank you and having enjoyed the presentation. Caesar has just asked the question, do you mind this Emotet through an OT network, Industrial Operations Tech Network?
I don't think I understood the question well, what the Industrial Operation Tech Network means. But in that case, I mean, if it's like if he's talking about the how it spreads across the network, yes, mostly like drives, and as I said, through the lateral movement that it utilizes stolen credentials and to spread across the email, as well as you utilizing drives that has been configured with weak passwords.
Okay, great. Caesar, I hope that answers your question. Musunda, where does Emotet sit? How can you find Emotet?
Well, as I in the slides we said, as I discussed, how to detect it. So that's where, if that's what the question means, that's where it sits. If it sits on the host, on the network, on the hard drive. So those three techniques that I mentioned, you would be able to find where it sits.
Excellent, thanks. Marco has said the HBL, so that's the hash block list, detects about a third of the Emotet malspam that I can detect with custom spam assassin rules. Do you have any suggestions how to improve the detection of malspam?
I think that's for Matt.
Well, I mean, you would detecting. I mean, it's essentially just apply as much threat intelligence to your incoming email network as possible. So essentially, where I was talking about how you want to do that multi-layered approach, things like antivirus are going to pick up some of the attachments. Some of them may not. But being able to, if you're able to block the macro enabled files and whatnot from getting onto your network or getting into your email mailboxes, you want to do that. And yeah, I would continue to use the things like the HBL, use our DBL. And there's also the that zero reputation stuff that we also offer, and other people offer certain things like that, where it's newly registered stuff that could be used, but for the most part, since all of this is really hack stuff, you just want to look for that type of stuff. So anything that is being listed as that it's legitimate but has been compromised, that's somewhere where you could do that. And that's really it in terms of thing. And of course, use a spam filter like your Cloudflare Sirens of the world. That's something that could also help you mitigate that as much as possible.
Great, thanks, Matt. And thank you all for joining us. Really, really appreciate you taking time out for your Thursday. Somebody's just asked if we'll be holding other webinars, and we certainly will be in the future, so keep an eye out for those. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and thank you all.